Listen, my good friend, in today's world, one of the greatest gifts you can give a child is the gift of affirmation. Every morning, before they leave for school, remind them to speak life over themselves. These words may look simple, but they are seeds of courage and protection in a society filled with hidden dangers. Let your child declare, "I am strong. I am loved at home. Nobody will touch my private parts. I will always report everything to my parents." These words may look like play, but they carry power. They build confidence, they set boundaries, and they prepare your child to face the world. Parents, never underestimate the strength of teaching your children to affirm themselves.
She thought school was a safe place, until one day the food wasn't safe, and the teacher's hands weren't safe either. But one girl's obedience and her courage to speak out saved not only her life, but many others. Parents, this story is for you. Welcome to Folktales by Chisom, where African stories come alive with suspense, mystery, and lessons for every home. The city of Lagos had its own rhythm in the mornings. By 6 a.m., the entire estate was already awake. The hum of generators being switched off, the chatter of women sweeping their front yards, the call of bread sellers echoing through the streets. Agege bread, hot bread, buy your akara here, fresh akara. It was the kind of chaos Lagos was famous for, but for Emily, it was just another school day. Emily was 9 years old, a slim girl with neatly braided hair packed into 2 ponytails. She lived with her mother, Mrs. Grace, in a modest but warm 2-bedroom flat on the 2nd floor of Block C. Mrs. Grace was a woman of discipline. Widowed early, she had raised Emily single-handedly, balancing her banking job with the challenges of motherhood. Neighbors often said she was too strict, too controlling, but she would only smile and answer with one line: "Better to raise a disciplined child than to cry later." That morning, as Emily finished her bath and came into the living room, Mrs. Grace sat waiting with her lunchbox. Inside was jollof rice wrapped neatly in foil, 2 pieces of fried plantain, and a small bottle of water. But it wasn't the food that mattered most. It was the rule that came with it. Mrs. Grace bent down, tying Emily's shoelaces herself. Then she looked directly into her daughter's eyes, her voice calm but firm. "Emily, my daughter, remember what I always tell you." Emily nodded, already knowing the words by heart. "Never eat anything outside. Bring it home first." Her mother smiled faintly. "Yes, not every gift is safe. Not every smile is real. If anyone gives you something, even your best friend, even your teacher, bring it to me. Do you hear?" "I hear, Mummy," Emily said softly. Grace reached for Emily's shoulders and pulled her close. "This world is not the way it used to be. Children are the targets now. Promise me, Emily. Promise me you will obey." Emily looked into her mother's eyes, wide and innocent. "I promise." The promise lingered in the air like an invisible shield, though neither of them knew how much it would be tested in the days to come. By 7 a.m., Emily's school bag was packed. She carried her lunchbox in one hand while the other clutched a slim storybook. They stepped outside into the estate compound. Children in different uniforms were already streaming out with their parents, some clutching biscuits, others dragging backpacks almost too heavy for their size. "Mama Emily, good morning," a neighbor called. "Good morning, Mama Tolu," Mrs. Grace replied, adjusting her handbag. The walk to the estate gate was short but lively. Street vendors waved, children laughed, and security guards greeted parents rushing off to work. A school bus painted bright yellow waited just outside, its driver honking impatiently. Emily climbed aboard, waving goodbye as her mother called after her. "Emily, don't forget what I said." "I won't, Mummy." The bus drove away, the children's voices rising in chatter and song. Mrs. Grace stood at the gate for a moment, her heart unsettled in a way she couldn't explain. She pressed her palms together and muttered a short prayer. "Lord, cover my child today. Let discipline guide her steps inside the bus." Emily sat by the window, watching the streets of Lagos fly past. Shops opening, hawkers chasing cars, Okada riders weaving dangerously. The city was alive, restless, never sleeping. She opened her storybook, but her mother's words echoed louder than the printed text. Never eat anything outside. Bring it home first. She whispered the line under her breath, like a secret oath. At that moment, she couldn't have known how those very words would become the thin line between life and death before the week was over. Greenfield Academy, tucked inside a busy part of Sur-Lair, was one of those private schools parents paid dearly for. The classrooms were spacious, the teachers wore neat uniforms, and the children spoke polished English sprinkled with Lagos slang. Emily's class buzzed with excitement that Tuesday morning. Her classmate Sophia had announced it was her birthday. Sophia's father was a well-known businessman who spared no expense when it came to showing off his wealth. By 10 a.m., delivery men arrived carrying cartons of soft drinks, packs of cupcakes, and gift bags tied with ribbons. Balloons in red and blue floated at the corners of the classroom. Even the teachers seemed more relaxed than usual. "Children, let's clap for Sophia," their class teacher, Mr. Daniel, said cheerfully, his baritone voice filling the room. The children clapped and sang the birthday song, their voices rising in laughter and excitement. Sophia, in her neatly pressed uniform and shiny shoes, stood proudly in front of the class, her braids decorated with colorful beads. She looked like a princess. Her mother had also sent along cartons of meat pies, biscuits, and juice boxes. The gifts were shared quickly. Emily received her party pack like everyone else. The pack was beautiful, wrapped in cartoon-themed nylon, and inside she could see a cupcake topped with icing, a packet of biscuits, and a drink. Her classmates tore into theirs immediately. "Wow, this cake is so sweet," one boy shouted with his mouth full. Others opened their drinks and began clinking the juice boxes together like bottles of champagne. The whole class turned into a party ground, but Emily quietly slid her party pack into her school bag. "Why are you not eating?" Sophia asked, her brows furrowed. Emily smiled shyly. "My mummy said I should take it home first." The other children laughed. "Church girl," one boy sneered. "You too, they form holy," another teased. "Better eat now before teacher takes it," Sophia insisted playfully, but Emily shook her head. "I'll eat it at home." The laughter rose again, and the children went back to their snacks. Emily sat still, watching quietly, her stomach rumbling, but her resolve firm. By break time, the mood of the class shifted. It began with a boy at the back, clutching his stomach. "Ah, my bell, oh," he groaned, falling off his chair. Another girl screamed as her cupcake slipped from her hands. She vomited all over her desk. Panic erupted. Within minutes, 3 more children were on the floor, crying and groaning in pain. The once lively classroom became a scene of confusion. "Jesus! Somebody help!" the assistant teacher shouted, rushing to one child who had fainted. Teachers from other classes ran in. Children screamed, some trying to escape the room. Chairs overturned, balloons burst in the chaos. The school nurse arrived, but the situation worsened. More children began vomiting. Their faces turned pale, their bodies weak. "Call an ambulance!" one teacher screamed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Parents were called in frantic tones. The principal, a stout woman with a stern face, rushed in, her wrapper tied hastily over her shoulders. "What is happening here?" she demanded. The answer was clear. Something was terribly wrong with the birthday food. By the time the ambulances arrived, 6 children were already unconscious. Parents wept as they carried their children away. Teachers whispered nervously among themselves, some shaking their heads. But through it all, Emily sat frozen at her desk, clutching her bag tightly. Her heart pounded as she remembered her mother's words. Never eat anything outside. Bring it home first. When she finally got home that evening, she told her mother everything. Mrs. Grace opened the birthday pack on the dining table. She lifted the cupcake carefully, sniffing it. Then her hand brushed against something unusual. Tucked beneath the cupcake paper was a folded piece of red paper covered in strange chalk symbols. Her face drained of color. She picked up the juice box and noticed a bitter-smelling powder clinging to the straw. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Emily, this is not ordinary." She quickly wrapped the items in a black nylon and hid them in the kitchen cupboard. Her hands trembled as she sat down, pulling Emily close. "You see why I always warn you?" she said softly, though her voice carried fear. "Not everything that looks sweet is truly sweet." Emily nodded, her little heart pounding with the weight of the discovery. That night, Mrs. Grace could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above her, whispering prayers under her breath. The image of the red paper and the bitter powder haunted her. Something told her that the sickness at the school was only the beginning. The following day at Greenfield Academy was heavy with unease. The laughter of the previous morning had been replaced with whispers and worried glances. Desks sat empty where sick children once played, and even the teachers seemed restless. Parents arrived at the school gate demanding answers. Some refused to leave their cars until they saw their children safe. Others threatened to withdraw their wards altogether. The principal walked the halls briskly, sweat beading her forehead as she tried to maintain order. In Emily's class, silence hung like a curtain. The children who remained stared at their books, subdued by the memory of classmates collapsing around them. The colorful balloons from Sophia's party now sagged, half deflated in the corner, an eerie reminder of what had happened. Emily, though relieved she had obeyed her mother, couldn't shake the image of her friends screaming and clutching their stomachs. She clutched her pencil so tightly her knuckles whitened. "Children," Mr. Daniel's voice broke the silence, "let's continue with our mathematics." He moved around the class, his baritone unusually cheerful, as though nothing had happened. He was a tall man in his mid-30s with neatly trimmed hair and spectacles that gave him an air of intelligence. Parents trusted him. The school trusted him. But Emily had begun to notice something others didn't. As he walked past her desk, he patted her shoulder lightly. "Good girl," he said with a smile. Emily stiffened. It wasn't the first time. For weeks now, he had found small reasons to touch her. A hand on her back when checking homework, a pat on her head during roll call. At first she thought nothing of it, but now after the birthday party, every touch made her skin crawl. Later that afternoon, while the children bent over their notes, Mr. Daniel leaned close to Emily, pretending to look at her book. His hand rested on her back longer than necessary, pressing gently. Emily's chest tightened. Her breath quickened. She wanted to push his hand away, but fear glued her to the chair. When he finally moved, she sat frozen, staring at the numbers on her page without seeing them. At closing time, as the bell rang, Emily packed her bag quickly, eager to escape. She avoided his eyes and hurried to the waiting school bus. That night at dinner, she was unusually quiet. She picked at her rice, her eyes downcast. "Emily," Mrs. Grace said, studying her carefully, "you haven't touched your food." "What's wrong?" Emily shook her head. "Nothing, Mummy." But Mrs. Grace wasn't convinced. She had learned to read her daughter like an open book. She reached across the table, holding her hand. "Talk to me. Did anything happen at school today?" Emily hesitated, her small chest rising and falling quickly. Finally, with tears brimming in her eyes, she whispered, "Mummy, my teacher touches me in ways I don't like." Mrs. Grace's spoon clattered against the plate. Her heart thundered in her chest. "What did you say?" Emily's voice broke. "He pats me. He puts his hand on my back, sometimes on my shoulder. It makes me afraid." For a moment the room was silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. Mrs. Grace's eyes burned with both fear and anger. She pulled Emily into her arms, holding her tightly. "My daughter, you did well to tell me. You are safe here." She stroked her hair gently. "Never keep quiet when something feels wrong." Never. That night Mrs. Grace couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, the lights of Lagos twinkling outside, and prayed. She remembered her late husband, how he had always said, "The world is not kind." Raise her to be bold, to speak now. The truth was staring her in the face. The sickness from the birthday party was one danger, but another had been sitting quietly in her daughter's classroom all along. As the night wore on, Mrs. Grace knew she couldn't remain silent. Something had to be done.
The morning sun in Lagos seemed harsher than usual when Mrs. Grace walked into Greenfield Academy the next day. Her steps were steady, but inside, her heart beat like a drum. Emily's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "My teacher touches me in ways I don't like." She couldn't ignore it. She wouldn't. At the school gate, parents lingered in small groups, their faces etched with fear. Some spoke in hushed tones. Others raised their voices angrily at the security guards. "My son has been vomiting all night," one woman cried. "My daughter is still in the hospital," another shouted. "This school is hiding something." The atmosphere was heavy with tension. Even the guards looked uneasy, glancing nervously at the restless crowd. Inside the building, the principal, Mrs. Oladipo, sat behind her desk with files stacked high. Her face was drawn, her wrapper tied tightly around her chest. She looked up as Mrs. Grace entered. "Good morning, madam," the principal said, forcing a smile. "How may I help you?" Mrs. Grace sat down slowly, her hands folded firmly in her lap. "It's about my daughter and your teacher, Mr. Daniel." The principal blinked. "Mr. Daniel?" "Yes," Mrs. Grace said, her voice firm. "Emily told me he has been touching her in ways that make her uncomfortable." The principal shifted in her seat, her smile fading. "Ah, madam, Mr. Daniel is one of our most trusted teachers. Are you sure?" "I am not here to debate trust," Mrs. Grace interrupted, her voice rising. "I am here because my daughter had the courage to speak up, and I will not keep quiet." The principal exhaled heavily, tapping her pen against the table. "These are serious allegations, Mrs. Grace. You know how people talk. It can damage reputations." "Reputation means nothing if children are not safe," Mrs. Grace snapped. Her eyes blazed with determination. At that moment, a knock came at the door. Two teachers stepped in, their faces pale. One leaned close to the principal and whispered something. The principal's brows knitted tightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. Mrs. Grace's sharp ears caught fragments of the whisper. "Birthday packs. Daniel helped carry them." She leaned forward. "What did you just say?" The room fell silent. The two teachers exchanged nervous glances. "Talk!" Mrs. Grace demanded. Finally, one of them cleared her throat. When Sophia's parents brought the birthday food, it was Mr. Daniel who supervised the delivery. He even helped carry the cartons to the classroom." Mrs. Grace's pulse quickened. She gripped the arm of her chair tightly. The principal waved her hand dismissively. "That does not mean anything." "Does it not?" Mrs. Grace cut in sharply. "Children collapsed. Strange things were found in those packs. And now my daughter tells me the same man has been touching her wrongly. You still think it means nothing?" The tension in the office thickened. The principal sat frozen, her pen trembling in her hand. The teachers stared at the floor, unwilling to speak further. Mrs. Grace rose slowly, her voice steady but heavy with warning. "If you will not act, I will. I will go to the school board. I will go to the police if I must, but I will not keep silent." She turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. Parents in the hallway looked up as she passed, sensing her anger. Some followed her, asking questions. "What did you hear?" one mother pressed. "Is it true a teacher is involved?" another whispered. Mrs. Grace shook her head. "Pray for your children," she said simply, "and tell them to speak up. There are things happening in this school that cannot be ignored." That night, she told Emily everything she had heard. Emily's small face turned pale. "So, the food and Mr. Daniel?" she whispered. Mrs. Grace stroked her hair gently. "Yes, my daughter. But listen to me. You were wise to obey me, and you were brave to speak up. You have done nothing wrong." Emily nodded, though her eyes brimmed with tears. She crawled into her mother's lap, her little hands gripping tightly. "Mummy, will he come again?" Mrs. Grace's heart squeezed. She held her close and whispered, "Not if I can help it. God will fight for us." As the lights of Legos flickered outside their window, Mrs. Grace prayed silently again. The birthday packs, the sickness, the teacher. The puzzle pieces were beginning to connect, and the picture they formed was more frightening than she could have imagined. By the end of the week, Greenfield Academy was no longer the proud, cheerful school parents had paid so much for. Fear hung in the air like a heavy cloud. 3 more children had been admitted to the hospital. Rumors grew wild. Some said the snacks contained poison. Others whispered about charms, and a few even claimed the school was under a curse. The principal, Mrs. Oladipo, could no longer contain the rising anger. She called for a general parents' meeting in the assembly hall. It was a Friday evening, the sun already setting, and the compound filled with cars, buses, and okadas parked in disarray. Parents streamed into the hall, their voices loud, their faces flushed with frustration. Mothers carried files of hospital reports. Fathers held photographs of their sick children. Some came with pastors, others with imams. Everyone wanted answers. Emily sat with her mother near the middle row, her small hands gripping Mrs. Grace's arm tightly. She had never seen so many grown-ups shouting in one place. At the front of the hall, the principal stood with a microphone, flanked by a few nervous teachers. Mr. Daniel was there too, standing tall, his face calm, though beads of sweat dotted his forehead. He adjusted his spectacles as if nothing troubled him. "Parents, please calm down," the principal began, her voice shaking slightly. "We know these past days have been difficult. We are investigating the matter." "Investigating what?" a father roared from the back. "My son has been in the hospital for 3 nights. He nearly died." Another mother stood up, waving a hospital bill. "Do you know how much I've spent already, and you are still saying investigating?" The hall erupted in shouts. Some banged on chairs, others demanded refunds of fees. The principal raised her hand desperately. "Please, please, let us maintain order." But her words were drowned out by the uproar. Then one of the senior teachers stepped forward reluctantly. His face was pale. He cleared his throat into the microphone. "Parents, there is something you must know. The birthday packs, they were supervised by Mr. Daniel." The hall fell into stunned silence. All eyes turned toward the tall teacher standing stiffly at the side. Mr. Daniel forced a small smile, adjusting his spectacles again. "Yes," the teacher continued nervously, "he was the one who received the cartons from Sophia's family. He helped carry them to the class." Gasps filled the room. Mothers clutched their handbags. Fathers muttered angrily. Mr. Daniel raised his hand. "This is nonsense," he said smoothly. "Yes, I helped carry the cartons, but that does not mean I had anything to do with what happened. You know how people like to blame others when they cannot explain things." The hall buzzed again, voices rising in disagreement. Some shouted at him directly, "Tell us the truth! What were you hiding?" Mrs. Grace stood up slowly. Her heart pounded, but her voice rang clear. "It is not only about the food. My daughter told me this man has been touching her in ways that made her afraid." The hall gasped again. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some mothers shook their heads in disbelief. Others turned to glare at Mr. Daniel. "That is a lie," Mr. Daniel snapped, his composure cracking. His face flushed red as he pointed angrily. "This is all a lie to destroy me." But then, in the middle of the hall, a small hand rose. Emily's. Her body trembled, but Mrs. Grace squeezed her hand gently. "Be brave, my daughter," she whispered. Emily stood slowly, her little voice barely above a whisper at first. "He gave us the food, and he touched me." The hall went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the ceiling fans above, the distant honk of traffic outside the school gates, even the rustle of a mother's wrapper. Every eye turned to the little girl standing bravely beside her mother. Emily's voice grew stronger. "He touches me during class. I didn't like it. I told my mummy." A mother in the front row gasped loudly. Another father muttered, "God forbid." Mr. Daniel's face twisted with panic. He tried to laugh, but it came out shakily. "She's just a child. She doesn't know what she's saying." "Enough!" roared one father, slamming his fist on the table. "Are you calling this child a liar?" Voices rose again, but this time they were united. Parents shouted for the police. Some demanded he be arrested immediately. Teachers backed away from him, their faces pale. Mrs. Grace held Emily close, her heart racing with pride and fear. Her daughter's small voice had done what many adults could not. It exposed the hidden darkness. Within the hour, 2 policemen walked into the hall, their uniforms crisp, their faces stern. The crowd parted as they approached Mr. Daniel. He tried to protest, shouting about lies and conspiracies, but the officers gripped his arms firmly. As they led him out of the hall, the parents erupted in shouts, some angry, some relieved, some crying. The once trusted teacher was dragged away in disgrace, his mask of respectability shattered. Emily buried her face in her mother's shoulder as Mrs. Grace whispered in her ear, "You were brave, my daughter. You were the light that exposed darkness." The night air outside the hall was cool, but the estate buzzed with whispers of what had just happened. News spread quickly, not just about poisoned food, but about a teacher's betrayal and a child's courage. For Greenfield Academy, nothing would ever be the same again.
The events at Greenfield Academy shook the entire Surulere community. For weeks, the story spread from one estate to another, whispered in churches, mosques, and marketplaces. Mothers leaned over trays of tomatoes to retell it. Fathers recounted it at beer parlors. Even children spoke about it in hushed tones, as if the very name Mr. Daniel carried a curse. Some parents withdrew their children from the school entirely. Others demanded tighter security and new policies. The principal, Mrs. Oladipo, found herself facing both shame and pressure. Within days, the school board dismissed her for negligence. A new interim head was appointed to restore order, but the reputation of Greenfield Academy would never fully recover. For Emily, life had not simply returned to normal. She was still just a child, but her name had become a quiet kind of legend among her classmates. Children whispered, "That's the girl who didn't eat the cake," and "She's the one who spoke against the teacher." Some avoided her out of awe, others drew closer, seeking her quiet strength. At home, Mrs. Grace tried to shield her daughter from the weight of it all, but deep down she knew Emily had stepped into a kind of bravery beyond her years. Every night she prayed over her, "Lord, let her innocence remain. Let her courage not be stolen by fear, and help me raise her with wisdom." The neighbors who once mocked Mrs. Grace's strictness now approached her with respect. One evening, Mama Tolu knocked on her door, her face lined with worry. "Grace, please," she said, clutching her wrapper, "teach me how you trained your daughter. My Tolu eats anything outside. I'm afraid." Mrs. Grace smiled sadly. "It's not magic. It is consistency. Tell them the same thing until it becomes part of them, and pray over them. Always pray." Soon other parents in the estate began repeating 2 golden rules in their homes. 1. Never eat anything outside. Bring it home first. 2. If anyone touches you wrongly, speak up immediately. At a Sunday service in their church, the pastor even shared Emily's story, without naming names. He turned to the congregation and said, "Parents, this world is darker than it looks. Do not just buy books and pay fees. Give your children wisdom. Discipline is not wickedness, it is protection." The congregation clapped. Some nodded with tears in their eyes. Mrs. Grace held Emily's hand tighter, her heart swelling with both pride and humility. One evening, weeks after the incident, Emily sat on the balcony watching children play football in the estate. She turned to her mother and asked quietly, "Mommy, why did this happen to us?" Mrs. Grace thought carefully before replying. She stroked her hair. "Sometimes bad people hide behind smiles and uniforms. But God gave you wisdom and courage. Because of you, many children are safe today." Emily's eyes widened. "Me?
"Yes, you," her mother said firmly. "Your obedience protected you, and your voice exposed what others were too afraid to say." Emily leaned into her mother's side, a small smile breaking through her seriousness. But Mrs. Grace knew the journey was far from over. She understood that the world would present more challenges as Emily grew older, yet she knew that planting discipline and courage in a child's heart was like giving them armor against unseen battles. The estate gradually returned to its noisy, bustling rhythm, hawkers crying their wares, buses honking, children laughing. But in the hearts of parents, something had shifted. They watched more closely, they asked more questions, they prayed more fervently, and in classrooms across Lagos, whispers of Emily's story became a quiet warning. Children began to think twice before accepting sweets, and some found the courage to report when things didn't feel right. For Emily, life continued, but she carried the invisible crown of a survivor and a silent heroine. She never bragged, never sought praise, but her story had already written itself into the memory of the community. And so, what began as a simple birthday party became a story told and retold. A story of poisoned sweets and hidden charms. A story of a trusted teacher unmasked. A story of a mother's discipline and a daughter's courage. It was not just a tale for entertainment. It was a warning, a wake-up call, a lesson for every home.
Final morals. Not every sweet is safe. Some dangers come wrapped in balloons and ribbons. Discipline protects children even when parents are not there. Silence can destroy, but courage can save. Parents, prepare your children with wisdom, not just books and school fees.